Welcome back to Incoherent Ramblings no one agrees with. Today we'll be discussing COD's graphics, and not even colors or styling or anything, that is surface level. We're here trying to dig deeper, and firstly we have to go all the way back. So roughly 4.6 billion years ago, Earth was formed from... wait, that's the wrong script. In 2003, a game known as Call of Duty was released as a PC exclusive title. It was meant as a competitor to the Medal of Honor games. Now fast forward to 2005 and Call of Duty 2 was released on the newly released Xbox 360 as well as PC. So COD officially earned multi-platform status. The 360 was fascinating for a couple of reasons, which also made COD 2 so special in a technological way. For starters, it featured a 3-core CPU, whereas the average core count for CPUs at the time was at most 2. In fact, the first dual-core CPU was released by AMD in 2006, an Athlon 64X2, but the average PC had a single core chip. And from now, I'd like to just quote a Quora post that talks about the strongest possible 2005 computer. And even though the 360 did feature 512 megabytes of RAM and the limit for PCs was 4 gigabytes at the time, it was still extremely pricey. Then out of the base components, you have the graphics card, and the strongest option for PC was a GeForce 7800 GT, which featured a clock speed of 400 MHz and 256 megabytes of VRAM. Looking at the Xbox, and it outperformed that thing by having a 500 MHz speed with a VRAM capacity of 512 megabytes. It also more than doubled the amount of memory speed. 500 MHz versus Xbox 360's 1400. It's actually ridiculous how absurdly powerful the 360 was at the time of its release, but it becomes more idiotic considering the price of the 7800 GT alone was $450, whereas the 360 costed only $300. This shows you how much of a technological marvel that thing was, and it also makes for an excellent console for COD to modify its IW Engine 1 and develop IW Engine 2. While the first iteration of it still had much of the id Tech 3's, that's Quake 3 Arenas engine, components, IW2 completely overhauled it, leaving only the bases in it. It was a tremendous shift, and the tendency of COD evolving alongside consoles is a recurring theme in this video. This was when the series used DirectX 9, which allowed for multiple different things such as dynamic shadows for a select number of objects and bumpy textures thanks to a newer technology of texture mapping known as a normal map. It made it so the textures would no longer appear straight up flat. The game was also able to run properly on 2 cores of a CPU. And from this point onward, we see a tendency which started to slowly pull Call of Duty into console-oriented territory. The game became a fully console title in 2009 with the release of Modern Warfare 2, and from then it just stuck. It was making more sales than on PC, and all of that led to 2011 and Modern Warfare 3. People started looking into the IW4 engine and saying the game is based off of the Quake one, and thus the game is ancient and backwards. That's how people started using the word engine, and more often than not, throwing it around as a flashy new buzzword. Around that time, Battlefield 3 released to the public, and it was noticeably much better looking than MW3. That same logic of Battlefield still quote-unquote being better than COD persists to this day as well, but that is what I will save for another video. So yeah, the PC-oriented and not MNK-hating looking at you COD game was looking significantly better, but on consoles that had 2 more years of their life to suffer through, BF3 wasn't even running properly. The games barely ran on 30 FPS, full of stutters and such, whereas the much more tame MW3 ran perfectly smooth at 60 frames per second. Later, 8th generation consoles released. PS4 hardware finally allowed the COD COD devs to come up with something stunning, and come up they did. Advanced Warfare released in 2014 and featured fresh technologies at the time, such as PBR, IBL, SSLR, SSS, IBS, and SYBAU. Okay, but in all seriousness, PBR means physics-based rendering, which means the textures were more in line with how they look in real life, meaning metals reflect light differently from stone or wood, for instance. IBL, image-based lighting, is a special texture that manages how the lighting of the scene is colored, meaning it can now change depending on the atmosphere of the map. SSLR means screen space local reflections, and it means that anything that can be reflected gets reflected, and I do mean everything gets a reflection if it's visible on your screen. Lastly, subsurface scattering makes skin appear more soft and less reflective, which Battlefield 6 doesn't quite seem to grasp. How it works is basically under the surface of a material, light scatters, and you get a more natural look for everything, including vegetation. Later, Black Ops 3 came along and boosted the lighting system with volumetric lighting and color bleeding, which made the game's maps look and feel more alive. The last major leaps of the 8th generation of consoles were COD World War II with the continuation of physics-based rendering and of course Modern Warfare 2019. This game had a lot to show for it. Tremendous ambient occlusion, lighting which people won't shut up about like they know what they're talking about, great texturizing work, more precise photogrammetry, which meant developers could now make environments based off of real-life photo references, which in turn meant more realism, etc, etc, etc. However, I'm gonna ruin your fun and say that many things that people point out, like animations or styling of the game, aren't related to graphics. What people do consider graphics is often the overall aesthetic of the game. It's detailed, cluttered, it looks overall unclean with much rougher surfaces, screen shaking and everything of the sort. This game did set up a big breakthrough, but what people look at isn't really the graphics. For me, graphics mean technology. Technology was delivered. But my issue with Modern Warfare 19 is how people interpreted them, and now in 2026 we have people who somehow still believe that Modern Warfare 19 is the most advanced COD has ever been, and BO7 somehow lags behind, which is complete and utter bullshit. All that BO7 does is stylistic. The art direction, the map design easily manipulate what people see inside a game, which isn't a good measurement. If you want to judge BO7 and MW19, you should do it based on what really matters: technology.
People are afraid of technology. Technology!
I almost forgot to mention that the used IW Engine 8 was developed in 5 years. So that's how they got the time to do it. Then the 8th generation consoles were moved onto the background, since PS5 and Xbox Series X were introduced. Now there was another chance for the devs to shake up a somewhat stagnating image. Cold War was the first, but it was developed during COVID and with a little over 1 year of development, so we can excuse its a little dated appearance. Spinning the clock to 2022 then introduces us to Modern Warfare 2 and IW9, which is then announced as the unified platform for all three developers in an effort to simplify the work for them, considering content from Modern Warfare 2 up to BO7 needs to be well integrated into Warzone. You know, that shared experience across multiple titles that people somehow still care about? Right. So when the IW9 engine was developed, the main concern was that before this moment, the studios had a hard time integrating all the assets into Warzone due to games using a variety of different engines, mainly IW8 from Modern Warfare 19 and Vanguard, and Cold War's heavily modified engine that stems from IW3 with barely traces of it left. It was hard, so IW9 was supposed to be the solution. And now, let's return to the main point of this video, which I'm sure you already understood, and it's that COD moves on with consoles, since they just sell better. If COD was still a PC-oriented experience, the game would have been undoubtedly leaping further more frequently, rather than waiting for the next limitations to be dropped. And when people say, well, COD looks like shit, I just have to remind you, of two things. Firstly, COD looks simply good. Good enough that the graphics aren't your main concern most of the time, so you can focus on the gameplay. Nothing too mind-boggling, just good. Same as Modern Warfare 2 in 2009 or COD 4 in 2007. And secondly, considering all the limitations, COD also needs to be running at a smooth enough frame rate on those consoles. Of course the graphics wouldn't be as top-notch or as brilliant as you would have hoped. From where do you get your frames then? Consoles are the main thing holding Call of Duty back. It is extremely evident. Based on what we have discussed, it's been an issue for a long period of time. Also taking into consideration the fact that PS4 was a console that was miraculously obsolete before it was even released, since an average PC from 2011-2012 easily outperforms it. For instance, its APU is called the Jaguar, and it was a very weak 1.6 GHz chip. Later in PS4 Pro, they upgraded it to be 2.1 GHz, but for 2017 that was still not cutting it, being easily outperformed by CPUs of 2012, which were already running at 3 or 3+ GHz, and on top of all that, had level 3 cache, whereas PS4 Pro did not have that very necessary component for modern gaming. Additionally, the GPU was also falling behind, falling in line with performance akin to a 2012 or a 2013 one, like a Radeon R9 280X, instead of a 2017 or a similarly fresh graphics card. So the upgrade did little to save this obsolete before release console. Today, with announcements about Modern Warfare 4 flooding everything, we got news from the devs that MW4 is going to be PC focused, quote unquote. Now that the game will no longer be available on the 8th generation of consoles, we got another loop of events which will probably lead to more stagnation. Notice, I said stagnation, not downgrades over time or degradation. You think studios would walk backwards? It happened only once, and even that was due to force majeure factors, unrelated to the game itself. Let's all wish that MW4 does offer PC-specific optimization that the series desperately needs. It looks right now that Modern Warfare 4 looks quite good, and is definitely a step up. Once the game is fully out, I will certainly break it down. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching my vid. I'll try to bring more informative content to you as soon as I can. It's pretty exciting for me to make this sort of content. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.